Nick Caserio with plenty to say about the Texans at the scouting combine. What's he talking about when he's thinking about not spending some of this $67 million the Texans have in cap space? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. Let's talk about Nick Caserio talking about those Houston Texans at the scouting combine on Wednesday. Plenty to get into from the general manager covering the free agents that the Texans have, how he approaches the use of the franchise tag, the future of a key member of the offense. But the big thing that jumped out to me was Nick Caserio was doing a really good job of explaining that the Houston Texans are not open for business. They're not going to be an ATM for everybody in free agency. Sixth most cap space in the NFL, about $67 million to spend on a number of free agents, and the Texans have a number of their own free agents, some of the most in all of football. And Nick Caserio wanted to make it clear, hey, just because we got the money doesn't mean that we're going to use the money.
Some flexibility relative to financial commitments that we might be able to make, but you don't necessarily have to use all your money up in 1 year. So we've tried to, and I've talked about this previously, really look at your team in sort of 2-year increments. So whatever you don't do this year, that money's going to be used in future years. I'm sure I'll get a question here very soon about Nico Collins. That's coming. So that could be a player that maybe he's a part of the future. So you're dealing with the present, you're focused on the short term, but part of our responsibility is to kind of think ahead a little bit.
Thinking ahead, don't have to use all the money. You can roll over what you don't use. Nick Caserio very clearly saying that so that teams don't hit up the Texans thinking it's some ATM that they can go to and get a big payday for their free agent. And so that their own free agents don't think that way. They've got a number of free agents, and few of them should be highly compensated when free agency gets here. But I thought it was interesting that Caserio just out of the blue brought up, hey, remember, I like to look at things in 2-year increments, and we have a guy like Nico Collins who we maybe need to look towards the future. And then you start thinking, okay, 2-year increments, guy that maybe could be signed to a contract extension this offseason or next offseason. It gets a little interesting when you start thinking about a little bit bigger picture than just the 2024 season. The tough part about the 2024 season and free agency is the Texans need to improve the team as much as they can and take advantage of a season where they have a great financial advantage in C.J. Stroud's rookie quarterback contract, Will Anderson's rookie defensive end contract. Eventually, those players are going to take up a large portion of the salary cap because they're going to get paid. And these next few years when they are on much cheaper deals, taking advantage of those years and really kind of making sure that the Texans push the pedal to the floor in those years are really important. And it's not like they have a bunch of top draft picks set up here in this draft. They picked 23rd, couple of picks in the 4th round. They don't have the primary means to add to their team via the draft like they did last year, whereas this year they have free agency, they have a lot of money, they got some players that sure they'd like to bring back. And yes, it's good to look ahead for a guy like Nico Collins, but Caserio's got to open the checkbook for somebody, spend a little bit of that money, and that's how they're going to go about improving the team, as well as guys just getting better and playing better, but that's how they're going to have to go about improving the team. Now, he talked about Nico Collins. He mentioned the wide receiver for the Texans and maybe thinking ahead when it comes to Nico Collins. Caserio also talked about that a little bit more.
See, I think the focus right now will be on our free agents, kind of working through the process with them. Like I mentioned, we have as many free agents as any team in the league, so we've had a lot of dialogue, constructive dialogue with a number of representatives and agents, but I think we'll focus on the players that are free agents now, and then once we kind of get through free agency and get a little bit later in the spring, we'll kind of see where we are relative to other opportunities. But I think you all have seen kind of our openness or propensity to have discussions at any point, spring, training camp, during the season, mid-season, after the season. So we'll see how it all goes.
Let me put that through my Caserio translator for you, and he kind of hinted at it there at the end. Nico Collins is going to have a contract extension offer on the table as soon as they're done with this draft class. And maybe even a little bit sooner, but as free agency goes and they make some of the moves and then maybe right after the draft, Nico Collins, it feels like, before the next season, before he becomes a free agent, is going to have an opportunity to sign an extension with the Texans. Is he going to? I know what I would do if I was Nico Collins. I probably wouldn't sign the extension. I'd play a whole nother year, hope that I have another fantastic season, and then the Texans are in quite the pickle. They've either got to franchise tag me or they've got to go ahead and pay me the going rate for a wide receiver of my ability and my production. I'd play it out if I was Nico Collins, but at the same time, it's a third-round pick. He's made a few $1 million over these past few seasons, and if a contract offer for a bunch of money shows up on his table, it's going to be hard to say no to that. But that was Caserio on, hey, these 2-year increments that we operate with, we're going to spend a little bit of money, but we don't have to spend it all. We can kick it to next year. And I really think about the Chicago Bears. The Bears had a tremendous amount of cap space last year. They had a lot of holes to fill. They went out and spent some of that money in free agency last year. They went out and spent some of that money in extending a player that they traded for in Montez Sweat. And guess where the Bears are still in the cap space rankings? Right up there near the top. So you can go out there, still spend a lot of money, and still have money to kick around a year from now. So maybe Nick Caserio finds himself doing a little bit of that. I wouldn't recommend imitating the Bears a lot because they're not very good. But, if you spend some money, you can make a big investment in some other smaller investments and still have a lot of money kicking around when it comes to the 2025 offseason. Speaking of potentially one of those big investments, Jonathan Greenard at defensive end is somebody who the Texans are going to have conversations with. They're going to have to try to figure out what to do with Greenard. Do they extend him? I don't believe they'd use the franchise tag. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Do they let him hit free agency and talk about it there? Caserio was asked about the defensive end, the sack leader for the team, and the player that he affectionately refers to as JG.
He had as good of a year as he's had since he's been in the league. So I think the big thing with JG is just being available, taking advantage of the opportunities, and being able to do that. And he had a lot of disruptive plays. So, he's a good young player. So, we'll work through the process with these players and kind of see where we are heading into, a few weeks from now.
So no tipping of the hand, playing it very close to the vest. Not going to get a lot out of Caserio. I mean, he's not going to walk up there and tell you, yep, we're going to sign him. Yeah, we're going to pay him whatever he wants. No, we're not letting him hit the free agent market. We're going to extend him. He's not going to give you that. But, hey, he was a really productive player. He fits a lot of what they desire out of a player from a dedication standpoint. I know the injuries were a conversation for Greenard for the first few seasons. Well, he worked hard to stay healthy. He worked through some of the injuries this past season. So it'll be very interesting to watch this process play out because there's a really solid argument for Jonathan Greenard. If he wants to hit free agency, there's going to be a team that'll overpay for some pass rush prowess. And there will be a team that's a whole lot less worried about the games missed and a whole lot less worried about the injury history, and they're happy to add a guy who's got some of the most sacks in all of free agency. In fact, with Justin Madubuike likely getting the franchise tag from the Ravens or getting extended, Greenard's going to have the top sack number in free agency with his 13 sacks last season. So this is going to be some team that's going to be happy to pay for that production and bet on Greenard improving over last year if he does hit free agency. But if he really wants to be here, if you can come to a pretty good agreement where there's some give and take, there's some built-in protection for the injury history, then I don't see why you couldn't realistically see Jonathan Greenard back in a Texans uniform. Another free agent that Nick Caserio was asked about, a guy that he traded for a couple of years ago, turned into a starter and a key player on the defense when he previously was a bit of a special teams ace, and that's Blake Cashman.
Cash's role has kind of grown sort of incrementally each year. We traded for him, I think, with the idea that he would have an impact in the kicking game, which he has. And I think when he's had the opportunity to play on defense, I mean, he led us in tackles this year, which I'm sure nobody had that in their bingo card. So, but Cash has done a lot of great things for us. So, we'll work through the process. If we have the opportunity to bring him back, I think he'll, have a good role in the team.
Nick Caserio talking about a Texans bingo card. I'd love to know what was on the Texans bingo card for everybody. Probably wasn't win the AFC South, win a playoff game, and be 30 minutes away from playing for an AFC championship game. That wasn't on the bingo card. What's the free space? Nick Caserio, talking in circles around some stuff. I don't know. I don't know what the free space is on the Texans bingo card. Somebody getting hurt. I don't know. CJ Stroud being awesome. I don't know if that was on the bingo card. What was on the Texans bingo card? Let me know in the comment section down below. One more on a free agent. Steven Nelson, the cornerback opposite Derek Stingley. And you listen to the first two cuts about a free agent from Nick Caserio. This one's a little bit different. And I kind of like the, hey, calm down, we'll take care of it nature of this from Nick Caserio.
Had a great year. A lot of respect for the way Steve handled himself and the way he played this year. So I'd say similar to a lot of other players, we'll kind of work through the process there. There's a lot of good players that are out there in free agency, including some of our players. So we're going to have somebody out there playing it opposite Stingley. So kind of work through it here in the next few weeks to kind of see where we end up.
We're going to have somebody out there opposite Stingley. Yeah, well, I hope so. I also hope that it's Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback from Toledo, with the 23rd overall pick in the draft. But the cornerback discussion is for later in the week, as I am here at the Combine. DBs will talk on Thursday. Wide receivers will talk on Friday, along with some quarterbacks and some running backs. And then tight ends will talk with the DBs as well. So that's all coming your way. And you still got to find out what the defensive lineman and linebacker said about the Texans. That's coming in another video, so you don't want to miss out on that. And you won't miss out if you just subscribe to the channel and throw me a thumbs up on the video. Steven Nelson, he's a veteran. He's probably looking for a little bit more money than he was making. He's got a solid argument. Hey, I was paid this. I performed this way. I'd like a little bit more. I'd like the next Steven Nelson, not the current Steven Nelson. Now, I talked about the franchise tag with Jonathan Greenard, and while he didn't exactly say, hey, we're not going to franchise Jonathan Greenard because it would be too much money, that's kind of the implication that Nick Caserio put together when I asked him about how he uses the franchise tag, how he approaches that as a tool for team building.
It's a part of it. It has to be a part of your calculus, and it's really a fixed number. So anytime you assign a tag to a player, it's essentially you're committed to that value. Now, it doesn't mean you can't work out a long-term contract extension with that player, but it's sort of a fixed number. And I would say, kind of what I talked about a little bit earlier, it's almost a starting point in a negotiation. So you have to figure out, is that valuable? Does that make sense? Or let the player get to the open market, let the market dictate what the value is. So honestly, it's a little cat and mouse game. So you just try to take the information in, try to have a general understanding of the market, and try to make a good decision.
It becomes a starting point for the conversation. If you franchise tag Jonathan Greenard and you say want to sign him to a contract extension so he doesn't play on that fully guaranteed 1 year, $20+ million contract, well, then all of a sudden the very base minimum for guaranteed money for Jonathan Greenard is $20 million. And then you start thinking, okay, if he was only going to sign a $40, $50 million contract in total value, and all of a sudden you're starting the conversation with $20 million guaranteed, the number gets out of control pretty quick. And that's kind of what Caserio is saying. Hey, look, you get committed to that as a negotiating point, and that works in the favor of the player more often than it works in favor of the team. And $20+ million for Jonathan Greenard, I'm much more comfortable if you want to have him on the Texans, signing him to an extension, having some built-in protection for the injury history, and making sure that that cap hit in that first year is not anywhere close to that big $20+ million that franchise tag is going to require when you do put it on Jonathan Greenard. The franchise tag on Dalton Schultz, that's a whole other conversation. I'd be in favor of that. You keep the relationship with Dalton Schultz for at least one more year, and then you can start thinking and working on a succession plan for him, or you could keep him off the free market and negotiate a contract extension with Schultz as well. So franchise tag, no for Greenard, yes for Dalton Schultz. If it gets to that point, though, extending Dalton Schultz ahead of time is definitely my preference and one of my hopes and desires for the Texans in free agency. Also hope for a running back in free agency. Glowing conversations from D'Amico Ryans about Devin Singletary yesterday. You can catch that video here on the channels. We broke down everything that D'Amico Ryans had to say about the Texans. Nick Caserio also talked favorably about Devin Singletary, in large part to help depress the market when free agents show up with their free agency card looking to hit the Houston Texans ATM. Hey, the ATM maybe doesn't have a lot of money because we like Devin Singletary. Sure, whatever you say. You're telling me if Saquon Barkley shows up with the right offer, the right conversation, you wouldn't go with him instead of Devin Singletary? As much as you like Devin Singletary, I don't know that I totally believe that from the Texans. But Nick Caserio was just very bluntly asked by somebody, hey, what do you think is going to happen when it comes to free agency and this loaded running back market? And Caserio, he was pretty funny and he was pretty flippant in his response. And he kind of had like a little bit of, I know something that you don't know from the comment.
In terms of what do I think is going to happen, we're all going to find out.
It was very smooth and dapper for Caserio. Let's hear it again.
In terms of what do I think is going to happen, we're all going to find out.
We're all going to find out. You're going to find out because I actually know. It's kind of what I took from it. Maybe he has a good idea of how this free agent running back market is going to go and play out. Hope he does, because they've got one running back on the roster right now in Damian Pearson. I don't really trust him to be a factor in the top two spots on the depth chart when it comes to the running back spot. But you got plenty of avenues to add a running back to the equation. You can do that certainly with free agency. Maybe it's bringing back Devin Singletary and adding a veteran to the equation with him. Maybe it's moving on from Singletary and the other mid-level guys for a top-level guy. Maybe it's Singletary and a rookie, though this is not the deepest rookie running back class that I've ever seen. So the Texans certainly have some work to do in free agency. You've got some work to do as well. That's right. I'm putting a job on you. You got to throw me a thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out Houston Football for all my writing about the Combine and the Texans. It's just $7 a month. It gets you everything for just $7 a month. And if you buy a year at once, I'll give you 2 months for free as well. The link is in the description down below. You can check that out. On the way down to the link, throw me a thumbs up. And what did you think of Nick Caserio's comments? Did he know something about the running backs that we don't know? Throw it in the comment section. The video might be coming to an end, but the comment section always stays live. Appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.